thanks to everybody for coming. We've an amazing lineup of speakers and social events and everything for you in the coming 4 days. Delighted to the individual participants for coming as well. It's really great, and there's people traveled literally from all over the world, so it's our privilege to host you. It's not raining in here, and that's about as much as I can comment on the weather. I promise the sun shone for the last 4 weeks. We moved this to June precisely to get some good weather. And obviously we did something in a past life or something, I don't know. But it can get better, I believe, this afternoon and tomorrow, but I wouldn't, you can't guarantee it. It's Irish. So the first thing to do is to thank the team. Now that's just a joke, but so we went for a run this morning. These are the 5 people that showed up. Thank you very much. And we quickly added this into my slides to embarrass the rest of you and make you feel guilty for not joining us on the run. There was a lot of comments on social media about how good an idea it is. It's very easy to comment about how good an idea it is. You have to actually get up at 7. See, I'm really enjoying this, aren't I? Anyway, the other team, a huge thanks to Louise, Debbie, and Beatrice. There is, as some of you actually know, I've seen people in the audience that do this and have done it, but as the rest of you can guess, there's a huge amount of preparation that goes into this. And honestly, from that team, it wouldn't exist without them. And an enormous thanks to all 3 of them for all the work they've done. On that note, I just wanted to mention himself, Aubrey, who's our partner in this event and the scientific inspiration for the event as well. And in his story, it's part of a long series of events that most people in the industry can harken back to which one of those events they first attended that got them interested in aging research, and in many cases then proceeded on to become an industry. And I guess I wasn't there at the start, but I can remember meeting Aubrey in 2010, and how much the world has changed from being a sort of a fringe niche on the activist side and on the aging research side. I mean, obviously, there was an awful lot of amazing things in the 90s and so on that happened, but it was still something from the scientists I met that they would be reluctant to talk about, because you wouldn't get funding, you wouldn't get any tenure, you wouldn't get, so you said you were studying Parkinson's even though you were studying aging. And that world has changed a bit as well, but maybe not as much as this gold rush longevity era that we're in at the moment, where everybody is in everyday conversation, discussing the concept and watching a YouTube video and getting some medical advice, and maybe confusing that with aging research, and who knows, we haven't defined, I think, what the industry is yet. But there is a lot of excitement and there is an awful lot of money. And I think one of the focuses of this event is to, if it has an identity, it's to concentrate on the harder, more challenging issues around the biology of aging itself. So rather than focusing too much on the low-hanging fruit or the relatively easily monetizable elements, we're looking at, okay, but what else would we do? And I think that if we focus on that just for a moment, it kind of highlights the importance of nonprofits. And I'll take Aubrey's example again here with the Lev Foundation and the Robust Mouse Rejuvenation Project. If any of you are not familiar, you should familiarize yourself with. But what's really interesting about that project, aside from the science, is that nobody else would do that project, even though a child can understand the value of the project, because we have a number of interventions that have, robust evidence of having some action on lifespan and health of organisms, model organisms. We've quite a few things that fit that bill nowadays. But a really important question is to know what happens when you have multiple of these interventions at the same time. What's the impact? Is it additive? Is it in any way damaging? And so, as I say, a kid can understand why you would do studies with a number of different interventions. And so that's what the Robust Mouse Rejuvenation Project is, but it's an expensive thing to do, and a non-profit capacity. You're asking people to donate to it, and they're not going to get a return. Some of the interventions being used are drugs that are available for 30 cents or 50 cents, a pop. So there isn't money in this. Pharmaceuticals are never going to do it because it's their whole MO is, one particular drug for one particular target. So this flies in the face of that. And also, even for academics, it's high risk, and you want to get published, and that's your goal in life. So this is something that really should be done for the benefit of humanity, but who's going to do it? And I think that's why it's incredibly important that we try to overcome the incentives of this really exciting nascent industry. But there will be a rush, and there is a rush of money towards, like I say, fairly obvious things, and in some ways things that we knew 50 years ago. Sleep and exercise and nutrition, it's not irrelevant, it's really important, but it's not new groundbreaking research, okay? Anyway, I think this is something for all of you to take a glance at if you're not familiar with it already. There's plans to do another one, but it requires a bit of funding. Is the funding a huge amount of money? Well, it depends. On an individual basis, sure, yeah, but when you spend a few $1 trillion on, militarization, then a couple of million on something like this for humanity is really small change. Okay, so that brings me to a kind of a concept of non-profits more widely applied, I think, in the field. And there's a lot of maybe even competition within the non-profit world, even though there aren't that many, but we're not getting that much money in yet. Now, when I look at other areas, for example, something like cancer research, you will have an umbrella organization, Cancer Research UK, Cancer Research whatever. They raise money really easily because they're a cause, and people feel like giving money to the cause and helping out and so on. Then they can disperse those funds by other organizations applying for them. And I think this is something we should consider within the community. If we want to have longevity research as a cause, or aging, it doesn't, it's not up to me to say what we call it. Maybe longevity is being, bastardized into wellness, I don't know. But whatever we call it, if we know that it's the decay and the decline and the deterioration of a human being, then that as a cause might be something that we can eventually turn people towards saying, yeah, you know what, I can give a tiny fraction of something towards that without having to figure out exactly who I'm giving it to, and then they can disperse it to the different organizations that are doing really fundamental, important research. I would also suggest, because there are companies now in this field, a lot of them spawned by Aubrey and his research back in the day, that are generating a huge amount of money. And I think to that longevity research, it would be great if they would consider a 1% pledge. So they would present 1% of their profits, just as a kind of a community pledge, would go back into nonprofits. Because ultimately, this is pre-investable research. It benefits everybody. The research that was being done 20 years ago, largely at his behest, is the research that has created the industry that we're all sort of dipping in and out of and benefiting from today. So the research that needs to be done is going to be the industries in the coming years. So it just requires a bit of foresight. The last thing I wanted to talk about, Carl Fleger, who's, I believe, here. I don't know if he's here right now. He's there. Hi, Carl. Carl is one of the best people to follow on Twitter. I hope you don't mind me saying. All of his posts are really, insightful and interesting and intelligent. He put up this post about flying cars versus flight. And the idea that, yes, sometimes we can do things really amazingly well and quickly, and that the image of 1903 tonight, we all get how profound the shift that is. And yet there are things, well, even self-driving cars, we really should have by now, right? And why don't we have them? Why aren't there all these other technologies that we don't have that we could have? And I think a huge part of that is desire. We don't want them. We want to drive a car ourselves, right? But we collectively wanted to be able to travel further than, I don't know, a horse or a bike or something. And we wanted collectively as nations to compete with each other to get to the moon. So there was a desire, it was stated. And I think if I kind of take a look at the overall industry, there's an awful lot of navel gazing and discussing right now as to, who's right, what are we doing, what is this about? Is it health span or lifespan, for example? Should we talk about lifespan? Are people going to perceive that as being kept in an infirm state for a long period of time, which thankfully is practically impossible? These things are not in contradiction with each other. You're trying to repair what I'm trying to call, and I'm just about to finish, the thing itself. So instead of being afraid to talk about this, over the years, and it does take repeat exposure, I've kind of forced myself to look at what the outcome of this is. So a very brief little story. I was in a restaurant in a kind of the front of a hotel a couple of weeks ago, and this lady was being led in by her daughter. She was in her 80s. She may have had, a disease. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't actually. But she was certainly very frail and old, okay? Whatever that is, it doesn't matter what it's called. I guess it does matter, but let's not decide it now, Whether it's deterioration, lack of frailty, lack of, robust functionality, I don't know. But you know it when you see it, like pornography, right? That's not me, that's a reference to a famous saying. You know it when you see it. And so this lady was coming down the stairs, and at that age, stairs are your mortal enemy. You're very, very afraid, you're very cautious. So daughter was leading her. They were going to have dinner with another daughter, and they were just a couple of tables behind me, and I exchanged a glance at her, and she got down further. I continued looking this way, and I heard a bang, and I heard a commotion. So she had fallen and banged her head against the table, and, the daughters were calling for the ambulance services, and she was okay, okay-ish. And everyone went back to their business. But I would assume almost all of us have gone through this with a loved one. If you think about what faces her for the rest of that night, the being taken in the ambulance, going to the hospital again, getting off your clothes, putting on a gown, lying down, having something, shoved into your veins, which are almost incapable of allowing any blood to flow out of it. It is not nice. It's really, really unpleasant. And we fight against it. Every year matters enormously for patients of other diseases. Of course it does, and it rightly does. But we haven't, I don't think, lots of people have, but I think we need to say more in a kind of a confident, brave way, that it's the thing itself, it's the deterioration, it's the aging that we want to tackle. And I know some people are hesitant about that, but to be honest, humans have never wanted to half do something. We're not going to get to a point where we say, everyone can now live 6 months longer and climb up the stairs 25% better. That's nonsense. That's not where we will ultimately go. But when we get there, just like the spaceship, is a function of how much we want it. And I think we need to want it a little bit more and be open to saying it. That's my 2 cents into the argument. Anyway, with that, I hope you have a great time. I hope you really enjoy the free drinks. You don't have to drink them, by the way, if you've got a problem with free drinks. But I hope you have a great time. I hope you network. These events are great for, it's still a new industry. It's still about meeting people and working together relatively easily. So enjoy it and enjoy the talks, obviously. And we'll kick off the first one. I'll welcome Aubrey to the stage. Thanks.